Good afternoon, Jehovah's Witnesses. My name is Jerry and I am a Christian. I'm not an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I'm not an apostate, but I'm doing what Christians are supposed to do. Jude verse 3 tells all Christians to earnestly contend for the faith. And my job as a Christian is to defend the faith, to proclaim the faith unashamedly, because it honors God to do that. We're told also in 1 Peter 3:15 to be ready always to give an answer to everyone that asks, to the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. So we're doing what Christians are supposed to do.
What kind of Bible do you have?
And I would like to show you probably one of the greatest errors of the Watchtower. If you hold on just a second, you can see it. This particular book, I believe, proves the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is not from God. It is a false organization, and perhaps the greatest book ever written against the organization, or at least exposes the organization, besides the Bible, would be this book. This book was written by the Watchtower. It was by the organization, by the Bible students. It's called The Finished Mystery. How many of you ever heard of it? The Finished Mystery, Volume 7 in the Studies in the Scriptures by Charles Russell. And it has so many false teachings and so many false doctrines and so many false statements that no one in the organization today would support this book. And yet if you were a Bible student, a Jehovah's Witness, if you will, in 1917, you would be expected to believe this book, to take this book all throughout the world. Almost 1 million copies were printed. And this was the light at the time in 1917. I'd like to read you a couple of statements from this book. On page number 4, it says, Charles Taz Russell is the faithful and wise servant. And of course you don't believe that today, do you? As a matter of fact, last year, 2013, the faithful and wise servant became simply the governing bodies. It troubled many Jehovah's Witnesses. They keep changing on who the faithful and discreet slave is. Now it's only the governing body, not the anointed class. But in 1917, it was Charles Russell himself. On this same book, and that's found on page 4 of The Finished Mystery, on page 54, it says Jesus was present since 1874. Not 1914 as it's taught today, but since 1874, Jesus was present. It says the remnant, that's on page 54, the remnant will be taken to heaven in 1918. Page 64. Jesus began his reign officially in 1878. That's on page 66 of The Finished Mystery. Consider this one. You've heard of Behemoth mentioned in Job chapter 40. The Finished Mystery says this is the stationary steam engine. That's what the Behemoth is. And Leviathan, that's mentioned in Job chapter 41, is the locomotive. That's what you would have believed in 1917. The angel mentioned in Revelation chapter 8, verse 5, the angel mentioned chapter 8, verse 5 in Revelation is the Watchtower Society. The incense vessel mentioned in that same chapter is, guess what? The Finished Mystery. Can you imagine that as taught in the book of Revelation, which you don't believe today? How about Michael the Archangel? We know who Michael the Archangel is according to the Watchtower. It's Jesus, they say. But in 1917, it was the Pope of Rome. This is from a Watchtower publication, The Finished Mystery, 1917. The Great Pyramids of Egypt confirms the fact that the time of harvest has come. You see, Charles Russell was a believer in the pyramids, that God spoke through the pyramids. There's even a pyramid on his tombstone. But you don't believe that today. And that's found on page 226 of The Finished Mystery. The republics will disappear in the fall of 1920. That's on page 258. How about this one? The voice of heaven mentioned in Revelation chapter 18, verse 4 is the voice of the Watchtower. In 1917, you would have believed that. The finished mystery tells you that. But of course, it's been changed. God sitting on the throne in Revelation chapter 19, verse 4, is Jesus, according to the finished mystery, page 290. A book that you would expect to believe. That would have been the light that you had in 1917. The kingdom of 1,000 years started in 1874 with the second coming of Jesus. This is found on page 386 of the finished mystery. God's day of vengeance started in 1914 and will culminate in 1918. That's in the finished mystery, page 404. And finally, I'll give you one more. Perhaps the most blatant of all of them. You would have believed this in 1917. God will destroy all the churches and all its members on or around April 27th, 1918. Another false prophecy. Folks, this book is so filled with false prophecy. I've only mentioned, and false teachings, only mentioned about a dozen of them. There's at least 100 in here that you no longer believe today, and yet you refer to your leaders as giving you meat in due season, a faithful and discreet slave, and yet these teachings you would have believed were false. They were lies. They weren't true at all. And what you believe today may change tomorrow. As a matter of fact, if you lived in Russell's day, you would have believed that Jesus is not Michael the Archangel. But today he is Michael the Archangel. If you would have been in Russell's day, you would have worshiped Jesus. Today you can't do that. Folks, how many false prophecies, how many false teachings does it take to see that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is not God's organization? As a matter of fact, the Watchtower is an enemy of God. And if you would test the Watchtower, you would find it fails every biblical test concerning a true prophet. Folks, I hope you give these things serious consideration. Serious consideration in that you search the Scriptures. Put your trust in the Bible alone, which tells of salvation complete in Jesus Christ, His finished work at the cross, torture, stake, if you wish. The blood of Christ cleanses me from all my sins, and I'm declared righteous in the sight of a holy God by faith alone, through grace alone, in Jesus Christ alone. Please give these things serious consideration. May God grant you wisdom and understanding.